Welcome to another episode of Book It. The latest work to hit the stands is The Future on the Indian Economy, Past Reforms and Challenges Ahead. Now, apart from giving us an overview, the evolution of the Indian economy in the last 25 years, importantly, it also helps us understand what we can expect in the future, what could be the possible challenges ahead. I'm absolutely delighted and honored now to be joined by one of the editors of this book and former Finance Minister, Mr. Yashwant Sinha. Many thanks, sir, for joining us on Book It. What is interesting, sir, you've said that even in your article, that even after 25 years, political acceptability of reforms in India is still low. And perhaps that helps us understand this puzzling scenario that when a party is in power, it will propose something, but when in power, it will oppose it. Why is that so?
Well, I'll take you back to 1991, when I learned my first lesson in this game. As is well known, I had prepared a very reformist budget to be presented in February 1991 because we were facing the severest crisis on balance of payments front. And what happened? First, I was prevented from presenting that budget. Politics came in the way. Then the government was brought down. Again, politics came in the way. And in 1991, when we were facing the worst crisis of independent India in the economic sphere, we also had a first-class political crisis. Then, you know, coming back to your question, I'll make 3 points quickly. Number one, the masses feel that economic reforms are not for them because it does not often touch them directly. So they are indifferent. And they can be easily manipulated by vested interests to start opposing reforms. The second is some political parties and organizations are ideologically opposed to many of these reforms. So they will, their opposition to reforms can be easily anticipated. The third is the opportunistic alliance, opportunistic opposition to reforms by some political parties to which you referred. And this also, I mean, I mentioned the Congress party. They did not allow me to present the budget, which ultimately became Congress party's budget.
And then Rajiv Gandhi pulled out support.
No, Rajiv Gandhi pulled out support, brought down our government, and more or less the same budget was presented by Manmohan Singh in 1991 and became a great event. So, if you take any reform measure, I'll mention the example of insurance sector reforms. You'll recall that under the UF government, Chidambaram had introduced a bill in Parliament. His own alliance partners opposed it openly in Lok Sabha, and he was forced to withdraw that bill. When I came with the bill, insurance reform bill, suggesting that it should be 49% FDI, then it was the Congress party which forced me to bring it down to 26%. And when they came back into power in 2004, they suddenly became enlightened and felt it should be 49%. Then we were in opposition, you know, in the standing committee it didn't go through, in parliament it didn't go through, discussions with BJP did not lead to anything. And when this present government came, they felt that it was such a good thing, 49%, that they did it through an ordinance. So that plus GST plus any major economic reforms, you will find that this has been the position. Some parties, like the left, have opposed them on ideological grounds. And some parties have opposed them because it was politically expedient to do so.
Let me be the devil's advocate here, sir, as far as this argument is concerned, because when we look at, when we look at the present, you were there, sir, for the midnight session of the Parliament when GST was launched, and the Finance Minister said that, this represented political bipartisanship. Over tax rates for over 1,200 commodities were decided on the basis of consensus. Not once did they have to put anything to vote, and this shows, perhaps some would construe as, as the maturity of political parties across across the country, that they needed to pass this reform which has been stuck for 17, 18 years. So isn't that proof enough that perhaps now we are seeing more maturity, more acceptability of reforms
No, there is no doubt that there is this maturity and there is this consensus. But let me qualify it by saying, before we run away, that which consensus are we talking about? We are talking about consensus in the GST Council. Now, I, as chairman of the Standing Committee of Finance, as the finance minister himself said, made sure by creating this requirement that if voting were to take place, then it can be determined, the outcome can be determined only by 3/4 majority.
That's right.
To force the GST Council to work on the basis of consensus. Number two, this consensus is between those who are in government, either at the center or in the states. And as far as the states are concerned, let me make the additional point that it is not the political complexion of the government, it is their own gains and losses of revenue which will determine their attitude towards a particular proposal. So if you say the rate of fertilizer should be so much, they will immediately calculate whether we are gaining or losing. And then that will determine their approach to it. So while we are very happy at the fact that in 18 meetings they have taken their decisions by consensus, I would not agree with the concept, with the theory, that it represents consensus across political parties and the masses of people.
Since the discussion started when you were in government, now that we have the GST has become a reality, are you happy with, with the structure it has taken? Because there have been some concerns. Is it too complex, 5 rates, or is this the best that we could have done at this stage?
I don't know, because I was not involved in the discussions or in the evolution of the ultimate GST that we see today. But, I like to remind you that when I had introduced central VAT, I had settled for 3 slabs and had brought about 12, 15 different slabs within 3 slabs. And the philosophy behind that was that we'll have a merit rate, a demerit rate, and a mean rate, the central rate. The central rate was 16%, the merit rate was 8%, the demerit rate was 24%. And that's where most of the products fell. And most of the revenue from CENVAT came from the mean rate of 16%, almost 90%. So that was something which had been achieved. And therefore, I feel a little disappointed that we have gone back to multiplicity of rates.
Yeah, because many would say that don't let the perfect be the evil of the good. So this is the best that we could have done at this stage. So let's accept it.
I don't know. I don't know whether a discussion in the GST Council was held or in the state-empowered group of finance ministers was held about collapsing the rates basically into 3.
Which you think would have been more ideal? A 3-rate structure?
To begin with 3 rates, ultimately maybe 1 rate.
What do you then feel could be the complications now because of 5-rate structure?
No, is it 5 rates or is it 7? Is it 8? One doesn't know. We say it is 5 because it's 5, 12, 18. But we have 3, we have 1.5, so that is not very clear how many rates there are. 1. 2, that 40% of the revenue stream is out of GST.
That's right, yeah.
So that is the second problem. And the third is that in terms of taxpayer-friendly arrangements, what has been done? Because I am reading disturbing reports even today about the number of filings which may have to be done.
Did you give your comments, your thoughts on the GST closer to when the council was meeting?
No, I have a very bad habit of giving my opinion only when asked.
So was your opinion asked, sir?
No.
During that? Okay.
No,
so you have talked about because you said that how we need to see reforms also in the context of the political environment, and a lot of times the political cost that reforms impose. You gave your example in 2004. Do you feel that GST is a political gamble in a sense? Because interestingly, in your book, you've said that the benefits of GST will come slowly, and you've said perhaps around 2019, which incidentally is also the election year. So is this a political gamble going by the experience and your argument that you've given in the book?
Not the GST, because as long as it does not lead to a marked inflationary situation in the economy, GST will be by and large accepted by the people. And I don't think it's going to lead to inflation.
When we write a book, let's say 25 years down the line, looking back at the reforms of the last 50 years, so in order of priority, 3 big reforms that you think will, will feature in that book?
3 big reforms, I would say, the biggest reform which has not yet taken place,
which you hope will happen in the next 25 years,
is improving the quality of life of the people, providing them with the basic needs. Then economic reforms have to be accompanied with, or at least in the given situation, followed up with administrative reforms and judicial reforms. So over the next 25 years, I hope these reforms take place, and ultimately we'll have a modern economy running along scientific lines.
With the reforms that we have today, where will GST stand, sir? In terms of its import, in terms of the far-reaching consequences that this may have?
Well, GST is a big, very big reform. There is no doubt about it. But it relates to just one tax.
Indirect taxes.
That is indirect taxes. So it is not a totality of reforms. The totality of reforms are many more and much bigger.